I recently sewed up 2 Unfettered Patterns sewing patterns, and I'm going to tell you all about what it was like to sew and work with these patterns today. You might have seen one of my previous videos where I shared 11 fall free sewing patterns with you. And I decided to actually put my money where my mouth was and sew up 2 of those free patterns to be able to make what looked to be some super cute blouses, but then also be able to tell you about it and what that process was like working with an unfettered pattern sewing pattern. I guess I don't need to distinguish that it's a sewing pattern. It is just unfettered pattern. Before I jump into the unfettered pattern review, welcome back to Dine in Creativity. I'm Rachel Ann. This is my channel fully dedicated to sewing, fashion, and the pursuit of creativity. The little top that I'm wearing is actually one that I also recently sewed up. I'm pretty much done with the tie front blouses for the fall or summer to fall transitional projects, but I'll be telling you more about this top. It took me on some twists and turns, let me tell you, at the very end of this video. So feel free to check out that chapter if you want to learn more about a little bit of a sewing mishap where I had to save it. But either way, I'm so happy that you're here. And without further ado, let's get into the unfettered pattern review. I'm going to go ahead and start with the sewing pattern that I pretty much just did not deviate from the pattern itself. Worked with the pieces as they were meant to be worked with, really didn't do any modifications, and that was the tie front blouse, which is UP1051. And by the way, I've linked all of these patterns, or at least the unfettered patterns, down below in the description. Last caveat statement, when I made the 11 free sewing patterns video, pattern itself is free. However, if you need the instructions on how to sew the pattern, then that is a cost. But when I went and looked through those listings to see that, in my mind, I just thought they were completely free patterns, which they are. You get the printout, you can put them together. If you have an intact level of sewing knowledge, for these 2 patterns, I did not use the instructions. I really didn't have any issues with putting these patterns together. So if you've never sewn before, then you may want to keep in mind that to know how to sew one of these garments and kind of understand what is this pattern piece and where does it go and when do I attach it, you might want to purchase those instructions. They are extremely reasonably priced, and for the very fact that Unfettered Patterns gives away their patterns for free, someone commented on that previous video I made, the 11 free fall sewing patterns, and said it the best, that it's very reasonable. Honestly, the fact that you get the sewing pattern for free and then they're just asking to donate what you think it's worth. I think it starts around $5 or $6 per pattern to get those instructions if you need them. It's a great deal. So UP1051, again, I didn't print out the sewing patterns. I found that it very much works with how I sew, which is to just kind of, in many ways, go sometimes do it the hard way, just try to figure it out myself and try to piece things together. I found it was like peanut butter to jelly. If you like peanut butter and jelly and you think it's a good combo, that's what I'm trying to say. It was a great combination. I found that there were only several pattern pieces, which I'm going to show you what the pattern pieces look like. Okay, I brought you into my home office because my sewing room is a disaster right now, if I'm being honest. It's Project Central. So these are the pattern pieces. There are 7 pattern pieces total for that tie front blouse. Again, this is UP1051, but every pattern allots for the 3/8 seam allowance, which is very nice, and I love that it's less fabric versus the 5/8 seams allowance of the big 4 patterns. You can see that the pattern pieces are very simple. I mean, really, you're just cutting out the front and the back portions, the sizing is all on the website. And then Unfettered Patterns also provides a lot of different tips on fabric options to use and consider when you're working with each specific pattern. You've got your front facing piece right here, cutting to. That's why I say if you have a little bit of sewing knowledge, you have already sewn up several garments, maybe, you know, a couple blouses, then in my opinion, the pattern pieces themselves are very self-explanatory. So you can see they are labeled grain line. I just used my home printer to print this out. Yes, I do have a dinosaur home printer for my my work. And that's your back facing, you know, so if you've sewn up facings before, then you know that you would attach the two neck facings together and attach them to the front of this shirt. And you have your little tie pieces that you would sew up, like sew it into the facing so that when it flips open, you have your beautiful tie and it has a nice finished piece right here, which I'll show you what that looks like in case this is not making sense. And last but not least, there is, you know, even an elastic guide that's provided. And so what I'm referring to when I talk about sewing the ties into the facing, this is what I mean. So when you're actually sewing that facing to this front piece, you would just make sure your ties are tucked, sew it down so that the facing would also be wedged in between the right piece of the fabric and that facing, so that when you flipped the facing back, the tie would naturally come this way. I don't know if that makes sense. It would probably make more sense if I showed it to you, but hopefully you get what I'm saying. Because if you don't do that, then you would just have to attach, just sew this facing right here. And then, you know, depending on whether or not you wanted that, it would then have that demarcation. Whereas this, you know, the little seam right there. Whereas this, it just gives that really clean finish. And you know, the facing is tucked in here. I sewed the facing down. This fabric was very interesting to work with. It frayed extremely easily. I mean, if I moved it the wrong way, if I breathed or looked at it the wrong way, it was shedding everywhere. So then the other thing I did was I did bias tape. It escaped me for a moment, to feed some elastic through. And I think it worked out great. It kind of turned out exactly the way I wanted it to. So truly, there's not too much when it comes to the pattern pieces for this tie front blouse version. I think it's super beginner friendly. And if you needed some added assistance, again, there is the option to pay $5 to $6 or more if you wanted to on the Unfettered Patterns website. I'm just realizing that this little necklace kind of creates some noise, and it may be picking it up on the speaker of my microphone. So I'm going to try to unclip this really quick and just hold it, because I don't want you having to hear all that ringing in your ear. This is the finished product right here. I find this to be an extremely versatile piece and a perfect summer to fall transitional piece, especially depending on the fabric that you used. I shared this on Instagram, as well as I think I did a YouTube really short little story. This was a single panel curtain that I found at one of my favorite local thrifts. It was just one little lone curtain panel, and I fell in love with the kind of faux crochet fabric of it. It cracks me up. It's such a funky top. I also made shorts, which I'll share more about in a different video, but I think it turned out great, and I kind of made it as a toile, a practice run that turned out to be a garment that I'm absolutely going to wear. So as you see it being kind of modeled with the turquoise linen shorts that are Simplicity 9290, my favorite shorts pattern. This could easily be paired with a white tank underneath or a long sleeve white bodysuit and jeans and some kind of closed-toed mule or flat boot of some sort to create more of a fallish vibe. So, to round up UP1051 Tie Front Blouse Unfettered Pattern Sewing Pattern, would I recommend it? Without a doubt, yes, I would recommend it. I loved it. It was one of those patterns where I almost just kind of breathed a little sigh of relief because, like I said, there were only 7 or so pattern pieces. It's a pattern where once you sew it one time, you've got it and you can go back to it. I can even see myself using that 1051 as a base pattern for then modifying and creating other cute tops. I could even see cutting the front pattern piece on the fold because there's that beautiful V-neck where that could even be sewn up. Oh, the final thing, maybe I should have put this in here. I'll put it in a chapter though. I did crop mine considerably. And it's not even really cropped at this point, but I took off, I think it was maybe 4 inches because I'm very short. So if I would have left it, it would have been a much longer tie front blouse. And while I think that would be super cute, it personally wasn't the look I was going for. Also, I think it would have been too long for me. So I opted against that and then just hacked it at 4 inches. But this is a pattern where you can just have fun. Just have fun with it because it is a basic pattern form with so many offshoots on modifications that you could do to make it your own. Let's get into pattern number 2 from the free Unfettered Sewing Patterns. This was the retro bell sleeve mock turtleneck sweater pattern. The pattern number is UP1041. Okay, I'm glad I took notes because by the time I got done with UP1041, I had very much modified it and tweaked it to make it to my liking. I'm going to share why I did that. First of all, I have to show you what the initial design was for the pattern. This is the most simplistic line drawing you're ever going to see. This was it. I wanted true bell sleeves. I wanted a bell shaped for the sides and the torso portion. And I found that this Unfettered Pattern UP1041, as pictured here on the screen, the comparisons, we'll do a side by side. The comparisons, which I only found after I cut out the pattern, were that the UP1041 pattern was much more narrow through the sides than what I wanted. So naturally, I just graded out some extra inch or 2 on the sides to give that little flared side. Secondly, the sleeves are the same sleeves of the UP1051 tie front blouse. I did not want that style, and it was hard for me to kind of see that from the line drawing. I think it would be the cutest pattern. It was nothing wrong. I can't specify this enough. To me, it was nothing wrong with the Unfettered Pattern UP1041 bell sleeve sweater. There's nothing wrong with that pattern. It was only stylistically, you know how you envision something in your mind and then you start cutting out a pattern, you realize, oh wait, this is actually not the vision I wanted. And that's when I made those modifications. So again, in my mind, I just wanted clean, non-gathered around the drop sleeves. I didn't want those gathers there. I just wanted it to be one clean line and a bell sleeve. So let's go visit the patterns real quick and I'll show you what I did. Here are all of the pattern pieces. There are even less than the previous Unfettered sewing pattern. So we only have 4 pattern pieces here. We've got the little neckband that you can use to create that super cute mock turtleneck. And then you have the sleeve and the front and the back pieces. This sleeve when I first cut it out, this is where the major or main modification that I made came from. I wanted to turn it into a bell sleeve. So it's a block when you initially cut it out, just like the pattern that we previously looked at. It's just a block. And then it would be gathered up here to then fit the armholes. You guys already saw my line drawing of the vision I had in my mind, and I just knew that wasn't going to work for me. So I basically just measured out how wide the top of this was, how wide each sleeve was, and made it fit. Just made it fit on there. Then I watched a pattern drafting YouTube video. I think her name is Diana. I will try to link her channel if I can remember it or go back into my history. She talked about how it's more haute couture to wave out, grade out your sleeve, because this little upward swoop here is the part where it's going to fall on the thinnest or the top part of your hand. And so it does not necessarily need to be as long as the rest of the pieces. I thought that was pretty cool. I said, you know what, let me just give it a try. And so I did, and I enjoyed it. It's definitely something I'm going to keep in mind. I think it's a nice little up level, I guess, if you will. So once again, you can see not many pattern pieces. If you have experience in sewing, you got this one in the bag. You like my hand for emphasis there. The final thing to note, I extended mine maybe 2 inches, an inch and a half, good inch and a half here on the front and the back, just to add a little bit more length. All right. Okay, so we just talked about the bell sleeve sweater and the main pattern pieces that came with it, the modifications, and this is the final result. You saw those quick clips earlier, but once I got in there and started working with the sewing pattern, stylistically, you've already heard the modifications I wanted to make. The secondary stylistic huge piece was the fabric that I chose to work with. This was from Joann's that I happened to scoop up in their closing down sale, and it is a gorgeous crochet. It is a very loud crochet print. And as I got working with this unfettered sewing pattern, I knew I was never going to do the mock turtleneck with this fabric because this is just not meant to be a turtleneck. So I had originally done a boat neckline. It was too much. It was too much. There was so much going on. I realized I needed to be able to show some more skin on my neck just to break things up. So I used the previous unfettered pattern. Now I'm getting them mixed up. 1041 versus 1051. I used the actual tie front unfettered pattern sewing pattern just to be a little guide on working with this. So when I did that, because it had already been a boat neck and I knew that this was going to happen, it created a very wide open space, which was fine. Like I said, there needed to be some skin showing just to break up this strong diamond print. I had to get creative and add a very thin swatch of elastic right around this back neckline because it was too wide and it was just too wide. So I just needed to bring it in by like an inch and a half to cinch it. Then I'll be honest, I just used twill tape for this front piece. I've already washed this. I threw it in the dryer. Literally, that did the trick. Now it fits me exactly the way I envisioned it and wanted it to fit. I think in the sewing process of ironing, obviously crochet is going to get a little stretched out. This fabric, it was a lot to work with. That's all I'm going to say. It's nubby. It's got all those holes. And of course, I love those finished edges. So let me show you what I did to finish these edges. You already know. I used bias tape. This is like a very thin cotton bias tape, so it's not rigid, it's not stiff, it's just going to move with the crochet material. You saw it from afar, but I just did kind of thicker rolled hems here. Sewed this down to secure it. Again, I did all this without any instructions, which when I had to add a little bit onto the sleeve because it was just a hair too short. Okay, this is me being super type A. It was probably half an inch too short. So I just created a little added band, used the bottom of the hem of this sleeve as my guide. I used my modified pattern piece that I had already created as my guide to create not a facing, but a little hem band. And then honestly, I zigzag stitched this portion, but then finished the actual edge with bias tape. For what was going to be a very simple top, there were quite a few steps involved only because I made so many stylistic changes. This one really, it doesn't look too much like the actual pattern, and it shouldn't because I made so many tweaks to it. So as you can see, it just barely flares out here. And then of course, you can see the clips of me modeling it. This is actually the perfect day for me to film this video because it's a little bit overcast outside. And the other evening, my husband and I went out to dinner, and as we were leaving, I thought, oh my gosh, it kind of has like a little fall kick in the air. You know how you can just sense fall is coming? I could feel it. And I can't wait to wear these two, what ended up being two tie front tops for the fall. All right, last but not least, I promised you I'd tell you about this top. Let's just say that the original pattern, it's in the donation bag, and I'm saying bye-bye. We're gonna take it, I'm leaving it. It was a Butterick wrap style pattern. I'm gonna try and dig it up. After it went haywire, I said, I never wanna see this pattern again. Immediately just threw it in the donation bag for Goodwill or a thrift store. But I will find the pattern and put it up here to share it with you. I don't know if there was anything wrong with the pattern per se. The instructions were very wonky in my opinion, all right? I'm just gonna go ahead and put it out there. But for me, it was stylistic. I got to working with it in about 20% into it. I realized I detest what I'm working on. And I'm working with this silky material, which is already difficult enough to work with. Do not hit go, do not proceed. I'm stopping it, which I rarely stop a project like that, especially only like 20% into it. Usually I'll keep pushing through. I'm so glad I abandoned ship. The pattern itself called for these pieces that went on the shoulder, and then you were supposed to gather all the fabric on both sides. It just, I didn't like it. That's it. It's totally personal opinion here. I am not saying anything negative about gathers. Just for me, I like simplistic. Once you get in there gathering and pinching and poking, I don't love it. I'll do a multi-paneled dress or garment, but gathering at the shoulders, and this fabric was already a remake. I got it forever ago from Joann Fabrics when I first kind of was early in my sewing journey, had originally sewed up this vintage top, and it also was sewn up really funkily because I just don't think I knew how to work with silky fabric. I salvaged it. I did the best I could with what I had to create a little bit of a weird tie front top. But I'll be honest, I put it on today and you see me it modeled. I'm digging it. I'm not mad at it. This is something I would wear this exact outfit. I am going to wear this exact outfit. These are tinsel pants from Banana Republic. Of course, I told you I get all my pants from Banana Republic. And I love them. I have them in khaki too, but I would totally wear this. I think it turned out better than what it originally had been sewn into. I'm glad I stepped away from that sewing pattern and just let it go because it's not me. I found that out. It's not me. And I have a couple other sewing patterns I also plan to donate unless I can somehow modify them into a new pattern that I would work with. But that wrap style top from Butterick, it had so many funky looking pieces. This large square piece here, I said, I'm done. wiping my hands clean of the crime, and I'm giving it to somebody else. Have you ever worked with any unfettered sewing patterns before? And if so, which ones did you work with and how did you like them? I did hear some positive feedback from, I believe, 1 or 2 people in that free 11 fall sewing patterns video regarding unfettered sewing patterns. And so this is definitely an avenue I'm going to continue to check out. I found them to be really easy and straightforward. Of course, having to print them out, cut them out, and then paste them together or tape them together, it adds on an extra step. But you know, at the end of the day, for a free pattern, I'm here for it. And I do consider it an absolutely a free sewing pattern, because it is. You print it out and there's your pattern. Again, there's just that instruction piece that you would have to pay for if need be, which I can see the merit 100%. The fact that this resource is even out there, once I peruse those patterns again, I would totally purchase one if I fall in love. So I just share that with you in case you've been on the fence about trying one, knowing what it was like. The 2 that I shared with you today, in my opinion, are absolutely beginner friendly, especially if you've already sewn up a couple blouses, so you know what a sleeve looks like, you know what the general instructions on the sewing pattern are, you'll be good to go. Unfettered Patterns actually provides a tutorial, or at least like a little article that you can click into on how to remove unnecessary sizing lines from the pattern in its PDF form before you print it out. I did that. I thought it was awesome. So just sharing all of that for you to use it as you will, make your most informed choice about what you want to spend your time sewing. Are you making anything fun right now? I would love to hear. Are you on hiatus from sewing? Are you, just kind of taking a break to attend to other things? No matter where you are, always meet yourself where you're at in your sewing journey. I hope you're taking great care of yourself. Happy creating and sewing, and be well.